Mark, I met him a couple of years through common activities with the Palladio Foundation. He will tell you much more about that. And I appreciate very much the work of EY and his team on the big challenges of real estate and housing industry. So, Mark, the digital floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Happy New Year to all of you. New Year with the very rare snow that, for older people like me, has is not so common in the Paris area. Just once or twice a year. It usually doesn't stick. So I hope you're not too frustrated by not coming to class. I'm frustrated because would have been much nicer and easier and probably more interactive. But let's make it as fluid as possible. And Bertrand, I count on you to interrupt me as rudely as often as you'd like. And I encourage all of you to do the same, even more rudely, even more frequently than Bertrand, because again, if we were face to face, that's what I would do. I would pick up a smile, a nod, a hand, and it's not as easy on Zoom. So bear with me, and please don't listen to me for an hour and 30 minutes or a little bit less. Bertrand, just let me know, confirm when we need to stop promptly. I think you said something like 12:30 or 12:45. I can't remember.
To 12:45 is okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
up
So
to you.
we have a good, enough time for me to actually talk about two subjects, and I will tell you where we're coming from and why Bertrand was kind enough to think that I could be of use to in this morning session. I have a set of slides, so that will help probably put your eyes on something, on some numbers and facts and some images. But again, I think your questions and hopefully my answers will help illustrate the topic a little bit better. Let me share my screen, and I need you to confirm that it is shared and visible for all of you in the right format. Is that okay with every one of you? You see hands, you see words on the left, so it's the right screen. It's not my grandson's picture or anything that I shouldn't show. I'm going to talk about impact of the real estate industry. I think it's important that we do talk about this as an industry, and we report on what the industry does on many dimensions of impact. So I'll dive into that in a minute. But I also thought, and Bertrand, you might remember, you said, that might be interesting as well, if we have time, but I'm going to allow some time for that. Talk about a very recent report that we published on the global business districts. So the central business districts that are the most powerful and visible. If I say Manhattan, the city, Singapore, Paris La Défense, and 30 others, you know that we're going to talk about the largest, the most vertical business districts, some in flux, some in very good health, others having difficulties managing the aftermath of COVID and the real estate situation across the world. So I thought this piece, very recent, we published it in November, would actually illustrate how the real estate industry in general lives in its larger ecosystem. Because of course, the real estate industry designs, builds, finance real estate and tries to make money out of it. It's an industry as a whole, and is defined as it is. But it has a larger role, and that's, I think, what I want to project today. Not only the corporate view, the growth, profit view, but also the larger impact and externalities that we can expect from this very, very particular sector. Maybe after giving you some introduction about where I'm coming from, what I know, I think I know, and I can tell you today, and a vast amount of things that I don't know. I'm not a professor at HEC. I was not even educated at HEC, so there's a lot of things that I don't know. But I'm very proud to be a partner at EY and have been a partner at EY for a number of years. So I've had my run of diversity of situations, clients, teams, countries that I've looked after, and I'll try to navigate that for the next hour or so with you. First topic will be how we measured the impact of the real estate and urban development sector, and particularly in France. So we're, HEC is a global organization, but you know where the central campus is, and the work we've done that is more, let's say, advanced, it has been done on the French ecosystem. So, but you can imagine that we can extend that approach of the measurement, the evaluation of the impact of the real estate industry across many dimensions. A little bit of teasing for what's coming in. We can illustrate that on a country by country basis, regional, but also asset classes. And then the second topic will come when I finish this one. And again, please interrupt me for any questions. As I said, I met Bertrand because EY is a partner of many professional organizations. We have, in this industry in particular, 15 to 20,000 people globally who work for investors, developers, managers of sites and urban areas, also, of course, designers, architects. So we're involved. We're also an occupier of large pieces of real estate, mostly office space across the world. I think about 30, probably close to 30 million square meters in the world, mostly in the large cities that I'll be talking about in the second part of this keynote. I run a team that across Europe, actually across EMEA, talks and actually is involved on measuring the impact. And it started with the impact of the economic impact. 20 years ago, even 5 years ago, probably we had a big transition around 2020, 2021 to measure other dimensions of impact. But we are proud and we are anchored in the economic, and we are still very anchored in the fact that for every aspect of performance to happen, to develop, social performance, environmental performance, societal performance, it has to start with a sound economic performance. And that's where we started a few decades ago, measuring the impact of an economy, of a business, of a sector. We still do that. We developed a lot of, I would say, adjacent businesses and zones, areas of interest. When, for instance, you have a new political, a big political, disruptive political transition happening, and it's happening now by the day. But it kind of caught us by surprise about 10 years ago when Brexit happened in Europe, that rocked our continent tremendously, not only the UK, but the whole continent. During and right after the first, when we were all surprised in 2016, you might not remember that, you were too young, during the first election, the first Trump election, the first mandate, everybody was caught by surprise, not only by the fact that he was elected, but also the type of political agenda, the style of agenda. I'm not going to talk politics. I don't think that's appropriate, but to illustrate why we did decide 10 years ago, 2016 was a pivotal date for that, to embrace the science of geopolitics as a more, let's say, wide encompassing and larger scope of activity to understand the economy, to understand the business perspectives for our clients, for ourselves. We needed to factor in new indicators, new facts, and we call it now geostrategy because you actually drive strategy with a lot of the geopolitical perspectives, development, sometimes disruption, sometimes conflicts that are taking place and again accelerating by the day. There are also a lot of topics that we captured as, let's say, great experimental areas to talk about how people, companies, society, and the many stakeholders would interconnect, and that can be captured within a city. That's why you see urban development as one of the topics that we very quickly also embraced as a very, very interesting area of expertise and study. We do that because a lot of our clients are asking us, big corporates, mid-sized companies, startups, where should I see the future for my activities, the people I want to hire, the next markets, and that is, can be summed up in the site selection approach. It's very practical. This is something we actually have done for a while, and it's still very valid, and has, again, to factor in so many more aspects of performance than just where can I be more efficient, more profitable. You'll see that in a minute with, again, the illustrations that I'm going to bring to the table. And this is all captured also in the fact that we also advise governments, local and national, sometimes transnational, like the European Union, on competitiveness and how to drive an agenda and a whole society forward through many, many aspects of competitiveness. That is across all the industries that you see on the right. You see that there are two more particular that are on the bottom of the right-hand side. Infrastructure and real estate, again, is a very large area that EY and many of our competitors, to be honest, have thought would be extremely interesting. Infrastructure is the daily life and the daily conduit for many, probably many societies in different shapes and forms, mature economies, emerging economies. You need to renew, you need to build, you need to educate, you need to house, you need to allow mobility and new forms of mobility. So that is why we think infrastructure and real estate have to be interconnected, and probably also talk about other aspects like energy, the digital interconnection that allow the flow of information, the flow of life and business across those real estate and communities. Creative industry, sports and culture are also, you'll probably hear a little bit of that in the second session. Interesting areas because they are the more advanced, avant-garde, should I say, forms of life, and they are about business, but they're also the daily practices and the daily life of all of us. We spend more time looking at our smartphone, watching a film, hopefully even with the snow, doing some sports today, and trying to visit and to travel even from a distance or very close to where you are. So again, you might find surprising that a big audit and consulting firm embraces so many aspects and mixes them together in a kind of a weird, diversified ecosystem. But that's very very powerful for us. It brings in many young, bright, and engaged people to work together on that. And one of the work that those teams have done along the recent years has been uh, not only what is the economy of the real estate industry that you can, present across the many asset classes, as they're called. This is a denomination that is very common: residential or housing, commercial or retail, hospitality. That has also this consumer B2C approach. That's why they're very, very often connected and put in the same asset class. Of course, the way we need to also talk about how do you plan and you project the growth or the reconstruction, the repurposing of large land areas in across cities or around cities. How do you build infrastructure? I've talked about it a little bit, but there are also facilities, and they're more and more considered as asset classes that have to be taken as business or business objects, not only infrastructure that you build and you finance with public funding. Of course, it still is very much the business model of public facilities, public infrastructure, but the public needs private money and can actually present bankable facilities, bankable projects to the private sector, whether it be banking, specialized infrastructure, private equity firms, or other type of investors, office and mixed use. So not only the office building or the office site or the business park, but also the fact that you also need people to come in for different reasons or attract new generations, new styles to the office, where when remote work is now the norm. I'll talk about this again in the second session more than in the first. So mixed use is the term that a lot of the industry uses to picture and illustrate how an office development is very often now constructed, again, within its community, but also with a business model and asset classes that are not only office, but sports activities, of course, food, sometimes housing, culture, in and around the business facility, and of course, industry and logistics. I should probably add new asset classes like data centers that are very, very much talked about. So this is, I wanted to show this very dry and very, structured matrix. Could be presented in many, many other ways, because when we talk about real estate, most often people think housing or people think office because they invest in housing, because they are occupiers of offices, but they have to consider, and you have to consider, that it is much wider, much more connected, much more mixed than it is usually presented. And I think that will help you understand, I think, the content and the spirit of what I'm going to present. And of course, I cannot, finish this introduction without also presenting what is a very closed, strict apartment. I hope the flat or the co-living or the campus
Marc,
where you live in doesn't look. Yes?
we have a question from Sophie.
Sure,
Sorry to interrupt
Sophie,
you.
you raised your hand. I should have seen that.
No, please.
Sophie, ask a question.
Thank you, Bertrand. Just to go back to the office space, do you think it's something that's maybe like declining in demand? Because I feel like with home working, and depending on the country you're in, I know in the UK, like you can never go back to a full-time in-person job, but I know in France it's a legal requirement to come to the office at least 3 times per week. So do you think it's a trend that will, at least building office space is going to decline or stagnate, or not too sure?
It has declined. I mean, the presence in the office has declined and had started to decline pre-COVID in some countries, and the UK, the US have been kind of either very predictive, very forward-looking, and are now probably the two, I'd say, not only the two countries, but work culture, where return to the office or remote work, the counterpart, has gone up, and where employers, if you talk about an employer from an employer perspective, has the most difficulty getting people back to the office, not only because they want to control, but because we all know that teamwork, physical presence, and some activities are essentially and much better accomplished when people are together. Are we going back to 100% office presence? And there are huge varieties of rates of days, remote days, home office, homework, and office presence in Asia, in most, let's say, high growth. I don't like the term emerging countries, but the Middle East, most parts of Asia, the rate of office presence is much higher, close to 90%. Whereas in a lot of the US cities, around the US cities, the rate of return to the office is closer to 50%. So it's a huge difference, and it has a huge impact on the business model. If you talk about it from a landlord or investor perspective, because of course occupiers have reduced their office space accordingly. You asked, there's no obligation in France to be 3 times a week in the office. Actually, I can tell about what we do and what a lot of our clients do is no obligation. We have no rule. The only rule that we believe in is a management rule, is a management habit. And we've seen our remote work rate, which is good, which I like, which I personally enjoy today, for instance, reduced to a day and a half in France, for instance, on average, with no obligation. Some companies will think it's the right HR policy, the right productivity guideline to have people as much in the office as possible. In some industries, it's just the way it is. In other industries, it's where also you have a different supply and demand HR system, where, to speak in more concrete words, the employer or the job market is in the favor of the employer, or the opposite of the employee. The remote work is relatively connected. So I don't think there's a rule. I'll talk about what it does to those very dense urban areas that you've probably either seen, maybe worked, and maybe lived in the countries where you're from, and you'll see that there again. It has a big impact on the state of the industry, on the profitability of the industry, on the uncertainty of the industry. But there is no rule of or common, let's say, perspective that I can provide, because it's so dependent on corporate culture, industry, geography, that the matrix is more than 3-3. It's math that I cannot compute and understand myself.
Okay.
Well, again, I'll try to be clearer probably in the later part. I wanted to maybe go on. Thanks for the question, Sophie, and don't hesitate to ask more questions, you and all the others. I think I wanted to finish this too long introduction by also giving you a picture of the many trades and many professions that you will find in the real estate industry. Again, because as much as the industry is very often seen as it's the housing industry or residential, it's the office industry. And of course, it drives a lot of money, and those are the asset classes that drives a lot of money and make the fluctuation more powerful, more evident. But also the type of professions that we know when you talk to a layman or someone in the street about the real estate industry, they will talk about this broker that has introduced me to an apartment that I like to rent or like to buy. They're talking about the developer whose brand they see on new developments across the city. But of course, sometimes they will see the public works or the works, and that's construction. But you also have to you know the profession. It's also a lot of design ahead with an idea, with a project, with a business proposition. Most of the time, it's developments where a developer is like the producer in the movie industry, where this is the profession and the trade that interconnects and assembles a project to be financed and then developed with engineering and technical professions coming in that have to be then constructed and at some point managed and sold and commercially. So you see the connections with all the, and again, it's a simplified way to present the many professions, probably more than 100, 120 different professions within these big 8 big blocks that I've presented to you, or rooms in the apartment. And I wanted to, again, show the diversity and the variety, because the approach of a profession may be in some ways contradicting with the perspectives of others. Let's put it in clearer terms. Right now, the money invested in the real estate industry is about 50% than what it was 3 years ago. So there is a big downslide or downturn in how much money is invested because of many, many factors. And I'm not going to talk about the market drivers and the many factors, interest rates, liquidity, demand, regulation. There are so many factors. But if you just take this approach that there is less money invested, that means that the developers have less resources to build. The social demand is as enormous and even more growing by the day, because you have new families coming in with new needs, because there is a new member in the family, so you need to increase the space, buy a new apartment. And if you don't have the supply because there is no money, you have to find ways to renovate. You need to find ways to squeeze in some of the stakeholders in the project, and architects are in the most pressure time, like the one we live in now, the profession that is suffering the most in the restrictions, in the fact that there is less work, there is less demand and less supply. So again, the interconnection is very, very live and very lively when you see it again on a concrete basis. Again, for all purposes and daily purposes. This is why we about 10 years ago, and Bertrand, you've been so helpful when we tried to redesign this, what was basically a study on the economy of the real estate industry. 16, I want to interrupt myself just to have a glass of water and also hear your question.
Okay, yes, thank you. Just going back to your previous slides, don't you think that like in the ecosystem, there should be like something about like the state or the region? For example, like people that are thinking about like housing for people in needs, and yeah, like
They are 16, and that's why I said very good question. Those 8 blocks are the macro professions or the macro activities. But in some of these, in those activities, you have to resegment. And in the people you're talking about, so the city of Toronto, or the city of Bangalore, the city of Paris, are in the real estate management, or they are stakeholders or shareholders of real estate developers that are social real estate developers. So you can find public-led and publicly mandated authorities in several of these traits. Urban planning is the work of architects and urban planners, but it's sometimes, and most of the times, actually under the mandate and the perspective of a public authority that needs to plan not only for the 3 or 5 year of a product life cycle, but for the long term, because you have long-term needs. You need to factor in the social fabric of a community, and you can see parts moving, you see the congestion, you see the needs to have new public infrastructure. So yes, the public stakeholders, the cities, the elected officials, the social housing entities, the urban planners are in many of these professions. Again, they can be in the design phase, they can be in the development, they can be in the management of public entities. They're actually professionally very competent in managing the amount of real estate that a city or region or a country actually holds, more and more competent. So you will find them in many of these professions.
Okay,
Does
thank
that
you.
answer your question,
Yes,
16?
thank you. Yes, thank you.
And I'll send you, when I send you these slides, of course, they're yours as soon as I'm finished. I can send you the detail of the last report we've published. I'm only going to show you like 6 or 8 slides from this report, and you'll understand that yes, we are talking also about the public aspect or the public stakeholders in this vast ecosystem, not only about the business stakeholders that I've maybe mentioned more often in this introduction. Everyone wanted at some point to measure the amount of the size of the economy, the number of jobs. 10 years ago when we started this, the original idea was to from this foundation that Bertrand mentioned, the Palladio Foundation, that is the let's say the larger assembly of all these trades and professions that I've just presented. There are trade associations for every dimension and every activity. The developers actually have 15 or 20 trade associations. In the construction industry, you have trade representatives and ministries and entities. And I'm not only talking about France or Europe, I'm talking about everywhere in the world. But if you want to have a wider agenda, that is to promote training, education, to change regulation, not only to make your business and your life easier, but also because you see that there is innovation that needs to be integrated in the new regulation. I'll just mention, new material coming in. You have to allow and to, of course, make compliant or be compliant with health issues. So there's new regulation coming with innovation. There is, of course, regulation that is under the authority or the perspective of the public bodies to drive the environmental agenda, and I'm going to talk about that as much as possible. So the first reason why this report was published 10 years ago is to make sure that the regulator, the governments, the wider public, the young students or people in other professions would understand the potential of working in an industry that is has not been very good at presenting themselves. That is the predicament, or that was the foundation or the basic under which we started 10 years ago, just to illustrate, to present, to introduce to many, many stakeholders. And again, not only governments, but also the business communities, but also the candidates, the young recruits that were so hard to that found it difficult to understand the variety of again professions and trades and the potential of working in this sector. So we started by dimension 1 and dimension 2. What is, how big and how potentially interesting, attractive, lucrative for some people this industry is, how innovative it is. Is it innovative? How big is it? Where does it start? Where does it end? That is purpose number 1. Purpose number 2, social impact, is what is the employment? And is it a profession for me as a young woman, for instance, working or studying at HEC? Because I only see the construction side, I only see the engineering side, I see the brokerage, and I'm not particularly familiar or comfortable with the transactional, the hyper commercial, hyper business side. Is there a public side of this? 16, very good question. That I can maybe, where I can maybe see a career and a perspective for me. And this is where we started 10 years ago by looking at the economy, but also the social fabric, the employment, the type of talent, profiles, and needs by the industry and the many stakeholders in this very, very wide sector. The dimension that came right after that, 6 or 7 years ago, was the environmental dimension, because there's so many interconnection between environmental aspirations, environmental innovations, environmental regulations, because if you take it as a big ensemble, the real estate industry is the number 2 producer of carbon. If you take housing and the energy that is required to build and construct, and the energy that is the output of the real estate asset, for instance, in industry or logistics, if you take the wide and the larger fabric of real estate, you have a big impact on the environment. And of course, because all communities, all governments, and all stakeholders in the industry, and you in particular, and the consumers and the investors, not only the militants, all want this carbon footprint and the environmental pressures of the real estate industry to reduce, to improve, to have less impact on biodiversity, to find solutions. So we tried to measure, and we started to measure, to not only say we're very good at the business we're doing, dimension number 1, we employ a diversity and a variety of people, of profiles, and there is work for everyone and anyone for the next 20 years. But we also are doing something where we have a negative impact currently, and we're driving that agenda as well. And then very recently, about 2 years ago, we started to say, but this is all merging into one big role that we in the industry, and I'm considering myself as an industry player, as one of the professions that I showed you in the department, in the advisory, consulting, expertise roles. We think we're doing something for not only because there's a business and there's a business model, or there is a purpose. there is also a value in what we're doing if we do it right. For instance, if we build better, more connected, more housing that is more intelligent of the social fabric of a larger region, if we build it in the right place, with the right setting, with the right people, we can do a lot of things better than what our predecessors. And I'm not judging the fact that in the 60s or the 70s, big projects were built that we now see are obsolete, are not conducive of social interactions, have created many, many problems that we couldn't foresee. And we're probably making the same mistakes now with other ways of doing things. The central business districts that I'm going to talk about after that is probably one big asset class that has to change its way and become more horizontal, more mixed, more in the city, more socially sensitive. So the social impact and the societal impact of the industry is something that you'll see what the industry thinks about its societal impact. And it's quite rash and quite abrupt, but it has a societal impact that it can grow. And if you see the societal impact for some of us, for some of the public entities, but not only for the public entities, also for the investors and developers as a core purpose, it starts to irrigate and actually improve every other aspects of your activities and of even your business proposition. So I'm going to be more concrete with that in a minute. So bear with me. I'm going to show you now what it does apply to a country like France. What is the economy of the industry? What is the employment and the social fabric? I'd like to call it that way. What is the status right now in the situation of the environmental transition that this industry has to take into account and probably to accelerate? And where do they, the stakeholders, the managers, the leaders of the industry, where do they see their societal impact and their societal role? Let's start with the economy. Again, applied to a country like France, I know that from the first analysis and extrapolations that we've done in other countries, it applies to many European countries. It doesn't apply to all the geographies globally, but in Europe it applies. So what I'm going to show you again for a particular country from where I'm speaking today, you'll find it interesting, but you can take it into account for in a wider perspective across Europe. It's a big sector, so you'll understand very quickly that whatever's in blue is kind of the positives or the progressing indicators, and where you see orange coming in, some factors that are either puzzling or negative or in decline. The big fundamental, when you compute the whole industry, the 8 professions, all the asset classes, it's massive. More than 10% of France's GDP. And this is not widely known. And it actually is a very important factor when you start to build corporations with other industries. You have to let them understand that there is a wide potential in this industry. It's not only a single developer or a single investor or a single public entity. There's a whole mesh of profession and activities that are coming in, and you bring in a whole ecosystem that is extremely massive. If you talk to a government, they're not talking to a very small industry that have very specific vertical siloed needs. You're talking about a holistic sector that has to be understood holistically and as a very important, critical, strategic piece of your economy. But on the other hand, it's a struggling industry. struggling because the confidence index, if you interview, like we do every year, 500 executives, again, in all professions, from all asset classes, including public decision makers, mayors and administrators of public real estate. 46%, so less than half of them, think that they're confident in the 3-year outlook of the industry, because this industry has been, since 2022, completely rocked and disrupted by in Europe by the war in Ukraine, which started an energy and inflation crisis. Aside from the geopolitical and the political impacts, it had an enormous impact on the economy, and in particular on the confidence index in France. It started with 75% of confidence. It's a very confident, maybe overconfident industry. It's now a underconfident industry, and it has a lot of reasons to be, because the energy cost is now more reasonable than it was in 22 and 23, but still is a big factor in how you build, in how you need to renovate, and the cost of building, the cost of housing, the cost of managing huge real estate assets. There is the election and the political cycles. There is the interest rates and the situation in the fundamentals of the industry. There is the fact that investment is down by 50%, as I said before, and has been down for the past 3 years. And the industry, although it still represents 10% of the whole economy of France, is down by 1.2%, or was down by 1.2% between 23 and 24. And we're computing the numbers for 25, and it's going to look like a little bit like this downward trend that I'm presenting now. Of course, again, I've presented, and that's why I wanted to be a bit more, maybe too precise and too detailed about the many professions that you see on the left, and the many assets that you see on the right, because you see a huge difference in confidence and perspective depending on the type of sector you're in. At the lower end of the spectrum, in terms of business conducted, the developers of real estate have been less in demand, because money is scarce, because the supply of real estate is scarce, and interest rates, although they have also gone down back to a new situation, we're now in a situation where the cycle of housing and the pressure applied by remote work on the occupation of office real estate has completely and significantly reduced the value and the size of the real estate, the development industry. Investment is also less active and productive. You commercialize less and fewer assets. Architects are in a situation where they are in the lower end also of the spectrum, whereas on the other end of the spectrum, and it's very marginal, but expertise and consulting, because there is a lot of innovation, a lot of new situations created by regulation and the energy situation. They are more in demand, but again, in a fairly stable, stagnant, or marginally depressed industry. In terms of asset classes, I've talked about the lower end. So there's huge impact of remote work on office. There's huge impact of investment on new residential. There is also a huge impact on e-commerce on the retail space. So you see the bottom of the right-hand side. There's huge impact of public debt and public deficits across Europe on public facilities, schools, hospitals. Whereas there are some asset classes that are very much in demand. Demographics, the aging of the population drives a lot of demand in service residence. So the senior residents and residences that are applied to above 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds, and the demographics will not stop. So that is an asset class, along with their healthcare, real estate, that is going to be much more in demand. Hospitality, because this is France. There is a tourism industry that actually is in one of its better cycles. Consumption is still pretty solid in tourism and hospitality, and the attractiveness of France has not reduced, and is actually, the numbers are actually pretty good, etc., etc. So you see, without going into too much detail, a big impact of the current situation on some professions more than others, and a big impact, positive and negative, on some asset classes more than others. If we look now at a more, let's say, positive aspect of this economy, it is very innovative. It has a big entrepreneurial dynamic. The money raised by what we call the prop tech, so innovators in the property segment or real estate industry, is not at the record level, but still has been very solid, because there is a lot of need to design new ways to commercialize with the use of data, and AI is, of course, massive in representing, introducing new offers, understanding trends, capturing your desires and your appetite before you even think about it. And there's a lot of innovation in design and construction, because there's a lot of new material. And I've often mentioned that the energy used and produced by the real estate industry is a big driver of the innovation in construction and design, because this is where the most improvement needs to be made to make those assets less thermally negative. If that's English, you probably understand. If I've said in French, there is a saying that's called passoire énergétique, so energy porous buildings. So that's the big problem. And with new material, new isolation, new ways of constructing, you have new ways of solving that and reducing the energy footprint and the energetic impact. Of course, when you have fewer people also occupying offices, you also need new ways to design and also to make sure that whatever happens in the office is extremely productive, extremely attractive, conducive of collaboration. So this drives innovation across the industry. I'll try to accelerate a little bit by talking about the number of jobs. It's a massive industry. There's a lot of people working in this industry. You remember the size of the rooms and the apartment. The two biggest employers in the industry are the construction industry and the management of real estate. So whoever manages housing, whoever manages your residence, whoever manages the land and administers the planning, that's where you have the most employment. It's not in development, it's not in design, it's not in engineering or in architecture. It's in those two big professions. And in total, it represents 2.4 million people across all of France. And again, this can be extrapolated to many other countries in Europe. It's very well distributed, but recruitment is less dynamic than it used to be. That's can be understood, and I don't want to repeat myself over the state of the industry and the lack of dynamic in some assets. But of course, still 58% of executives we've interviewed say I will need to hire new competencies and new people over the next 3 years. So we're not down to 20 or 30%, which would be very minimal, but the numbers were much higher, over 75% 3 years ago. Reduction in the reduction in number of jobs. So I need to accelerate so you understand that the rest of the probably indicators are either self-explanatory, or if you have questions on them, I'll be happy to answer. We look at some indicators that tell about the social fabric of the employment and the nature of employment. And two aspects that are particularly of interest. The report is full of many, many other indicators, but two that I wanted to flag today is how many women work in the industry. It's still a very masculine industry. 75% of the industry is masculine because of the weight of the construction industry. But in the management layers, this low number, so 75% men needs 25% women, but in the management of activities and businesses, we're up to 44%. Another indicator that we look at is the training dynamics and the training fundamentals. 2/3 of employees receiving training is actually higher than the average across many sectors, which is closer to 50-55. So this is an indicator that we think we would love to see 90% or even 100%. It's a very complex situation, but again, we see it as a positive indicator, or as an indicator that we see progressing fairly positively along the years. Let's turn now to the environmental impact. Again, a big effort has been made to measure and to understand what is a very complex, so it's going to be only 3 slides. So just a small window on where the industry is, what drives its trend in terms of reducing its environmental impact, and first its carbon impact, because this is probably where most efforts should be concentrated. What you see on the left-hand side is the trend of direct emissions that are derived from the use of residential and office activities. It's not the full life cycle, but it is the one area where we think the use of residential area, where we think the most efforts should be done, because this is the most impactful of carbon emissions, but also because, as you can see, when we had a fairly rapid downward trend from 21 to 22 and a 5% decline in carbon emissions between 22 and 23, this has reduced by 1% only. And the figure that you see on the right-hand side, 48, is the direction that it should take from 24 to 28. And it's obvious to you, bright students at HEC, that we're not going to reach that common industry goal with only a 1% reduction if the downward trend continues at that pace. First, why are we looking at a slowdown in carbon emission reduction, which is, again, puzzling and is not a positive? There's a change of regulation. There's a big pushback by companies, by corporations, and I'm talking very neutrally, to simplify, to deregulate, to make their lives easier, to decomplexify some regulation. So not because companies, businesses want to do harm to the planet, but because you have to find a balance at some point, and the balance that governments at the European Union level and the national levels, again, this is applicable to most European countries, although I'm showing figures about France, the regulation has simplified. You may have heard of omnibus at the European level. You may have heard of the simplification of the energy certificates called DPE in France. You may have heard of the reduction in financing and regulatory pressure called on renovation. We can judge that it's a bad thing, and businesses have won, are on the better end of that, pressure. But because the margins are very low, because some of the stakeholders of the industries are in a difficult situation, they have convinced the regulator to kind of pause the drive to decarbonize and to accelerate. We think it's temporary. We think that fundamentally, long term, there is absolutely no other way, not only in Europe, hopefully also in the regions where this is not the trend that you'd be looking at. I'm talking about the US and I'm talking about China, where actually there's absolutely no reduction and very low regulation on carbon emissions by the residential industry. If you look at China on electric vehicles, you look at a different situation. If you look at the US, you see a different situation as well.
Mark,
yes,
we have a question from Maurice.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just a very quick question about the graph on the left, because I was wondering, I think it's total emissions, right?
Yes.
Would you say this is more due to an effort of the industry to really decarbonize, or is this decline maybe more due to the fact that the industry is facing increased uncertainty and there's less building overall?
No, it's actually there's less there's less construction, so there will be actually the downward trend will continue because you have a reduction in the space, in the scope of emissions. But the downward trend is mainly due to the factors that I've just talked about and are very rapidly summarized on the right-hand side. Again, pressure to simplify the regulation. That means less incentive to decarbonize, to find new ways to build. There is less public support to finance innovation. There is less financial capacity by owners, either individual or corporate owners, to continue the decarbonization and the improvement of their real estate properties. So yes, there is a factor in the scope that is, again, more limited now because there is a reduction of office space. There is an augmentation of residential space, but not at the pace of demand. But all in all, yes, there is a factor in the reduction of scope. But the most influential factors in this slowdown of the reduction is again an ease up of the regulation and the financing of the environmental transition. If that's clear enough, Moritz, I don't know if it is.
Thank you very much.
It's not because there is less appetite. I sit in some industry boards and I see what clients are trying to do. Very frankly, could most companies, developers, builders do more? Yes, probably. Are they doing a lot? Yes, they are doing a lot. Have they found the right balance? Probably being nudged or pushed to do more, encouraged, if not forced to do a little bit more. Could that accelerate or relaunch the decarbonization of the industry? Because this is a very preoccupying graph to me on the left. And I haven't been shy when I presented this to boards and executive committees. They feel they do a lot of things. They feel that they don't have the resources and the cash flow to do as much as they should and they could. Long term, they absolutely think it's inevitable, and it's actually probably also conducive of business to have more environmentally sensitive assets and productions, because they're consumers, the families, the individuals who will go to shopping malls, who want to enter a new apartment that is at the best standard in terms of the environment. Most companies need to have huge objectives to reduce their carbon footprint and want to occupy buildings that are top level energy efficiency. But can they afford that at the very moment in 2025, 2024, 25, 26? No. That's, again, it's a matter of how much cash flow and possibility and resources there are, rather than reduction of scope, because less is constructed and you have mathematically or mechanically less carbon emissions.
Mark,
Yes.
we reach a tipping point. You mentioned you have something to say and share with students about business districts.
I will. So I've skipped some.
I wanted to mention you. We still have 15 minutes.
So, yes. 2 minutes on the societal impact, fourth dimension. When you ask 500 executives, again, across all trades, all professions, all asset classes, what are the societal challenges that they think they can tackle and that they think their business, their activities are about? It's livability. How much residential supply, residential communities they can build in new forms to apply to new demographics. How habitable are those the communities that they are designing and constructing, the interconnection between living and working, between where you train, where you have fun. There's a fragmentation across cities, and we seem to we're going into a ghettoization of those, and it's not what the industry thinks it should direct its perspective. It should actually direct its perspectives in more mixed, and not let ghettoization or specialization, ultra specialization. So it's a lot of things in very, very wide words, but you probably understand that the first preoccupation and the first societal challenge is how much housing, affordable housing, can be produced for families, single families, and in the current economic situation, less affluent families how can they inhabit? How can people work together? And can the communities be inclusive? And are there solutions that the industry can develop to make those communities more inclusive? Again, very rapid overview of the societal challenge. Before, Bertrand, you were right to take me to the next, for the next maybe 15 minutes, to this very interesting piece of information or thought leadership that we produce about the Central Business District. We looked at 30 of them. We looked at a lot of KPIs to understand in the US, in Latin America, Africa, Europe, Asia, Middle East, Australia, where the 30 largest central business districts, we call global business district because they are, again, the most visible and massive of them. I'm not talking about I'll show you the rankings and who's first and who's better. I'm going to talk about the trends that we saw from the research, from the KPI that we assembled across those 30 business districts, the people we've interviewed, the reports that we've looked at, and that are going to talk about remote work and the state of those business districts, try to answer the question that I showed you. Is it over for Manhattan, for the city, for Singapore, for Hong Kong, for Beijing Central Business District, for La Défense, etc., for Chicago, for San Francisco Financial District? These are the pieces of real estate that we've looked at. And the predicament or the starting question is this question, very much this question. After COVID, with so many people wanting to have a mixed use of office space and workspace, are we looking at dead men walking, or are we looking at different situations? And the first big surprise that we got from the study and from the report, interviewing hundreds of business leaders, is that 63% of them, almost 2/3 of them, are saying we see a path and we see a dynamic where those business districts have learned the lesson of, again, what I call this ultra specialization. They were 20 years ago built to be only office spaces, very efficient, very vertical, showing your power, your brand, your money, being close to each other, without too much to do at night or even during the day if you wanted to escape for a few moments. But a lot has been done to make those more applicable to the mixed use that I've talked about. And the result is that 63% of business leaders that we've interviewed are saying they are more attractive now than not in March or April 2020 when COVID hit, and those business districts were emptied in a matter of hours. But the study we conducted was in January and January 2020. So when we had a comparable situation to what we have now with fairly normal living conditions across the world. Why? Because there's still a big concentration of money and brand and power and legacy. There is a history, there is a protection of this history, a self-protection of this history and legacy, and reinvestment and habits from the corporates that are inhabitants of those business districts. Of course, there are many, many other activities, sports stadiums, retail, malls, housing, not in all business districts, but if you take the example of Midtown Manhattan, you have about 1.2 million people who work, and you have about 2 million people who live. So it's really mixed use in the best definition. If you look at La Défense, which is right outside of Paris, some of you know La Défense very well, and some of you don't. You have 200,000 people working, 120,000, 140,000 coming every week, at least 3 days a week. And you have 40,000, 200,000 people officially working in one of the big buildings in La Défense, and 40,000 inhabitants. And every year, 60 million tourists and shoppers and spectators of sports in La Défense Arena, for instance, and students. So this is to tell you why there's a legacy, because there's also a transformation of what those monolithic, homogeneous office constructions were and what they are now. You have 7 million people total working in those 30 business districts. So the bigger one, the biggest one like Manhattan that I've mentioned, to the smaller one in Sydney, in Riyadh, for instance. But it's also about the cities around them. The big cities where those business districts are located are also reason a big labor pool, a big market also for the companies and for the activities that are there for the retail operators. So there is also a business proposition that is very much around the city, not only about the very, let's say, circumvented area that is the business district. And one illustration of that, there's many indicators and much information, and I'll send you that in detail. It's because there is also a big concentration of the largest cities of our world, the Fortune 500. 84 of them are in those global business districts, in the perimeters, but almost half of them are in the cities where those business districts are usually the business hubs. So the business hubs themselves are the location of 84, but the larger area are the location of half of the Fortune 500. So again, you understand what I say about money, legacy, power, history, and a renovation and a transformation that is also a self-protection of that life that is transforming. But you have headwinds. The headwinds, if I talk about them before I rapidly talk about 4 megatrends that I think are interesting, that of course there is remote work. Remote work is a big pressure, negative trend on how the business model needs to evolve, because the asset class that is the office space is directly impacted, and is actually how you finance a lot of the public infrastructure. The taxes that are paid in terms of the leverage are paid by corporates, not by individuals or family that inhabit. So in terms of leverage, there is a 1-to-4 ratio in terms of, so you essentially need office space to make the whole community affordable, livable, connected, commutable. And so that's why the remote work phenomenon is a huge factor. And you see the average that it now represents. It answers one of your questions, but the average needs to be looked at with the big diversity of situation that I've talked about. 3.4 days a week of average, 4.5 in China. And I think we're about 2 days a week, 2.5 days a week in the US. Sorry for not being too precise, but you look it up in the report and you'll find the more detail and more precise. This footprint that occupiers, so the corporates that occupy the office space in those business districts, is going to be reduced even more. It has reduced by 15 to 20% over the past 3 years. It will be reduced, not in the same amount, but still the reduction is still in place and will continue. But we're probably more in an adaptation, stabilization phase. Your question earlier was about how are we doing now? I think the stabilization, how managers of teams, team managers, companies, but also the other stakeholders of those business districts, the retail operators, the transportation, the commuter companies, everybody has an interest in seeing the dynamic and the flow of people, whatever the occupation, continues to make the whole system affordable, livable, and let's say possible for the future. Let me talk about 4 mega trends. I think they're interesting. What everybody has said, when I say everybody, 76% of the people we've interviewed said that what is the top priority? Not only from an occupiers, from a corporation perspective, from a business perspective,